Hello everybody and happy Halloween! Woo! Are you scared, Doug?
Yeah.
Well, you should be, because today we are going to be taking a couple of my old videos and putting them together. Isn't that fun, Doug?
Yeah!
You know what those videos are?
Yeah?
That wasn't very convincing.
Yes.
Why would you tell everybody what they are, Doug?
These are retellings of the Edgar Allan Poe poems.
Yeah. I did these videos a couple years ago, and I'll be honest, I don't have much time to do a big Halloween special this year. So I'm doing it lazy, and
We're reusing old content!
absolutely, but I'm adding something to it. Isn't that cool, Doug?
Yeah!
I'm doing a third story. I did two on my other channel, Chris J Films, but now I'm doing a third story just for you good people at C.A.F.E. So, how about you give the name of the first story, Doug?
Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe.
That's the second story! The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to such a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but by the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is undressed when the retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally undressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity to practice imposture on the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting in Germany, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening, during the supreme madness of the carnival season, that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible, and in the middle of the carnival." "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado?" "I have my doubts." "Amontillado!" "And I must satisfy them." "Amontillado!" "As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchese. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me, 'Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry,' and yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let us go." "Whither?" "To your vaults." "My friend, no. I will not impose it on your good nature. I perceive you. I have an engagement, Lucchese." "I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no. It is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre." "Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you have been imposed upon, and as for Lucchese, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado." Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, putting on a mask of black silk, and drawing a rosicroix closely around my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and have given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient. I knew well to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from the sconces 2 plan below, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led to the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe," said he. "It's farther on," said I, "but observe the white web work which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned towards me, and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rem of intoxication. "Nitre?" he asked at length. "Nitre," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. It's nothing. It's nothing, he said at last. "Come," I said with decision. "We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi." "Enough," he said. "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." True, I replied. "And indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily. But you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps." Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mould. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us, and I to your long life." He again took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montresors," I replied, "were a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms." "A huge human foot door in a field azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant, whose fangs are embedded in the heel." "And the motto?" "Nemo impune lelechacit." "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes, and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons, intermingling to the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. "The nitre," I said. "See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle down among the bones. Come, we will go back ere it is too late. Your cough." "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first, another draught of the Medoc." I broke, and reached him a flagon of the Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed, and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend?" he said. "Not I replied. "Then you are not a part of the Brotherhood." "How? You are not of the Masons?" Yes, I said. Yes. "You? Impossible! A Mason?" "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my reliquaire. "You jest!" he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeau to rather glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead, in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th, the bones had been thrown down, and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no special use within itself, but had formed merely in the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in that vein Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchesi—" "He is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links around his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was much too astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand," I said, "over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I will positively leave you. But first, I must render you all the little attentions in my power." The Amontillado!" ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I replied, "the Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials and the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of my masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low, moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the 2nd tier, and the 3rd, and the 4th, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to hear it with the more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the 5th and the 6th and the 7th tier. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the mason work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope about it with the recess. But the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs, and I felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and strength. I did this, and the clamor still grew. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position, but now there came from out of the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "A very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo over our wine." "The Amontillado," I said. "Yes, the Amontillado, but is it not getting late? Will they not be awaiting us at the palazzo, the Lady Fortunato, and the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said. "Let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montresor." "Yes," I said, "for the love of God." But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again, "Fortunato!" No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth, in return, only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up against the new masonry. I re-erected the old ramparts of bone. For the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat.
Wasn't that so terrifying, Doug?
That was spooky, dude.
Oh my god, I am pumped up for the next story, aren't you?
Yeah, the Raven.
No, it's not the Raven.
No, I lied.
You got it right the first time. It's the Telltale Heart.
Oh, the Telltale Heart.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
That's my favorite.
I gave you a script.
I'm sorry. I obviously studied the script very well, and you don't remember it.
True. Nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How, then, am I mad? Hark, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with that caution, with that foresight, with that dissimulation. I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone in. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved very slowly, very slowly, so I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman been have so wise to do this? And when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it, just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible for me to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but the evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he has passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night just at 12 I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. And perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed, suddenly, as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch, with a thick darkness, for the shutters were closed, fastened for fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept on pushing it, steadily. I had my head in, and was just about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped on the tin fastening, and the old man sprang out of bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. Not a groan of pain or grief, oh no! It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul, when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo. The terrors that distracted me, I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart, I knew he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise. When he had turned in his bed, his fears had ever since been growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It's nothing but wind in the chimney. It's only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions. But he found them all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was in the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he never saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple, dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot from out the crevice, and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw in perfect distinctness all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could not see anything else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely on the damned spot. And have I not told you for what mistake from madness, but over acuteness of the sense? Now I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch's heart makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as if the beating of a drum would stimulate the soldier into courage. But yet even I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eve. In the meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say louder, every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety to seize me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out. No stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had cut all. Ha ha! When I made an end of these labors, it was still 4 o'clock, dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deployed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure and undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room, and desired them here to rest their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot which beneath reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and chatted. The ringing became more distant. It continued until it became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness, until at length I found the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I still talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such as a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, but the noise steadily increased. I rose and argued about trifles in a high key, and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited by fury to the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God! What could I do? I foamed! I raved! I swore! I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting, and grated against the boards, but the noise arose all over and continually increased. It grew louder, louder, louder! And still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, no! They heard, they suspected, they knew! They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark! Louder, 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 louder! Villains! I shrieked. Disassemble no more! I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here! It is the beating of his hideous heart!
Alright, well, Doug is still alive. I decided not to kill him. On the one condition that he gets our final tale of the night right. Right?
Well, it's the 3rd one out of 3, so I should get this one right.
Okay, Doug. Tell me what the 3rd story is.
Pretty sure the Black Cat is the 3rd one?
This is the Raven.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books of Suscre's sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors that I had never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor, entreating entrance at my chamber door. some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more. Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. Sir, said I, or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that scarce I was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal had ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word. Lenore? This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word. Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then, where Thorette is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, with many a flirt and flutter. In there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least absentience made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, with the mind of lord and lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering through the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marvelled, this ungainly fowl, to hear discourse so plainly, though its answers little meaning, little relevancy bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing a bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven sitting lonely on the placid bust spoke only that one word, as if his soul, in that one word, he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered. Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whose unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirge of hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore. But the raven, still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, unghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat, engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining, on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er she shall press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed by an unseen censer, swung by seraphim, whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch! I cried, thy God had left thee by angels he had sent thee. Respite, respite, and nenpence from my memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this nenpence, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent, or whether temptest, toss thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted. Tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, within the distant Aden, if it shall clasp sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume a token of that lie the soul had spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust upon my door. Take thy beak from out thy heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.
Well, that's my Halloween special. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm sorry I had...
Hey,
I thought I killed you.
I'm back.
Motherfucker. What you doing?
It's like the heart in Telltale Heart.
Happy Halloween, folks.
Have a Merry Christmas and everything. Bye-bye.
That's the wrong...
Nevermore.